Have you ever wondered what an ordinary morning felt like in one of the first great cities on Earth? Long before skyscrapers, engines, or electric light. When the sun rose over mud brick walls and the slow river that fed an entire civilization. Picture a wide plain where the horizon feels endless. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of river water and wet clay. In the early light, narrow streets begin to stir as voices drift from courtyards, ovens warm for bread, and the distant murmur of the Euphrates glides past fields of barley and date palms. Imagine standing there, a city rising from the earth itself, its walls the colour of sun-baked soil, its temples reaching slowly toward the pale sky. But what was life truly like here, in ancient Babylon? What did people hear when the city woke each morning? How did families live inside these quiet courtyards of clay and shadow? What traditions shaped their days? And what stories echoed through their nights? And perhaps most intriguingly, how did an ordinary person experience a civilization that would later become legend? Because Babylon was not only a place of kings and towering temples, it was also a place of farmers, merchants, bakers, scribes, children playing in dusty streets, and countless quiet lives unfolding beneath the same ancient sun. If this story is helping you slow down for the night, you might consider subscribing to this channel. It's a small gesture, but it genuinely helps these quiet historical journeys continue. And it gently reassures the algorithm that wandering through ancient worlds is something people still enjoy. And if you're awake for just another moment, you might leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I read those messages like tiny lanterns scattered across the map of the world, each one marking another quiet traveller somewhere under the night sky. Now take a slow breath in and let it fall away. Feel the quiet around you settle a little deeper. Make yourself comfortable wherever you are and allow the edges of your day to soften. Because tonight, we are travelling very far. Not just across distance, but across thousands of years. Now let's drift backward. Let the noise of the modern world fade, and imagine the ancient city of Babylon slowly appearing in the warm glow of a Mesopotamian sunrise. You arrive in a land shaped entirely by water and time. The rivers Tigris and Euphrates move quietly across the plains of Mesopotamia, carrying mountain snowmelt through a landscape that would otherwise be dry and unforgiving. Around you stretches a patchwork of fields, canals, and distant settlements, and rising slowly from this fertile earth is Babylon itself, a city that exists because humans learned how to guide rivers, shape mud into bricks, and organize life around the rhythm of irrigation. If you stand still for a moment, the landscape begins to reveal its quiet logic. Mesopotamia means the land between rivers, and here that name feels less like geography and more like destiny. Without these two long wandering waterways, this region would be little more than dust and scrub. Rainfall is scarce. Summers are intensely hot. The soil alone cannot sustain large communities. But the rivers change everything. Each year they carry fine sediment from distant mountains in Anatolia, spreading rich layers of silt across the floodplains. This soil is soft, dark, and astonishingly fertile. When guided into fields through carefully dug canals, it transforms the land into something rare in the ancient world, a place where agriculture can flourish on a vast scale. You can see those canals now, stretching outward across the plain like branching veins. Some are wide enough for small boats, others are narrow irrigation channels that snake quietly between fields of barley and emmer wheat. Water flows slowly through them, guided by small gates made of wood and packed earth. Nothing here happens by accident. Every canal must be dug by hand. Every channel must be cleared regularly of silt and debris. If the flow is misjudged, the land may flood or dry out entirely. The survival of the city depends on this constant balancing act between too much water and too little. Think about that for a moment. An entire civilization resting on the careful movement of river water through mud, and yet the system works remarkably well. By the time Babylon rises to prominence, generations of farmers and engineers have already refined these techniques. Irrigation becomes not only an agricultural practice, but a form of collective cooperation. Large communities must organize labor, maintain canals, and share access to water in a way that keeps the landscape productive year after year. Slowly settlements begin to grow. What may have started as small farming villages gradually expand into towns and eventually into cities. Mud brick houses clustered together for protection. Storage buildings appear for grain. Temples rise at the center of communities, both as religious spaces and as administrative hubs that help coordinate agriculture and trade. And among these cities, Babylon will become one of the most famous. But from here, standing on the edge of the plain, it still feels surprisingly quiet. The wind moves gently across the fields, carrying the soft rustling sound of grain bending in the heat. In the distance, farmers walk slowly along narrow ridges of earth that separate irrigated plots. Their movements are deliberate and unhurried, shaped by routines that repeat day after day. The sun above you feels large and bright in the open sky. This sunlight will define nearly every aspect of life here. Work begins early in the morning while the air is still cool. By midday, the heat becomes heavy enough that people seek shade wherever they can find it. Even the buildings of Babylon are designed with this climate in mind. But you will see those later. For now, the city itself waits ahead. At first it appears only as a faint line on the horizon. Then gradually the shape becomes clearer. A long stretch of walls rises from the earth, their surface glowing softly in the light. From a distance they almost seem to grow directly out of the soil, as if the land itself decided to become a city. Which in a way it did. Because Babylon is not built from rare stone or imported materials, it is made from mud. The same river silt that nourishes crops is mixed with straw and shaped into bricks. These bricks are dried in the sun until they become hard enough to stack into houses, walls, temples, and towers. So when you look at Babylon, you're really looking at the river transformed into architecture. Water becomes soil, soil becomes brick, brick becomes city. And in this quiet transformation, human ingenuity begins to reshape the landscape in ways that will echo across thousands of years of history. For now, though, the world still feels young. The rivers flow slowly, the fields stretch outward under a vast sky, and ahead of you, rising patiently from the fertile earth between two ancient rivers, waits the city of Babylon. As you walk toward the city, the first thing you notice is the wall. It rises from the plain like a man-made cliff, wide enough for chariots and soldiers to move along its top. Built from millions of sun-baked bricks, the wall glows softly in the sunlight, its colour blending almost perfectly with the surrounding soil. Babylon was not merely a settlement, it was a protected world, a carefully maintained space where order attempted to stand against the unpredictable forces of nature. The closer you walk, the larger the wall becomes. At first it seems like a distant line across the horizon, but step by step its true scale begins to reveal itself. The structure stretches far in both directions, curving gently across the landscape until it disappears from view. Ancient cities often relied on natural defences such as hills or rivers. Babylon, however, stands on a wide open plain. That means its protection must be entirely artificial. The wall you see before you is the result of immense labour. Tens of thousands of mud bricks stacked carefully together, layer upon layer, reinforced by thick towers placed at regular intervals. These towers allow guards to observe the surrounding land and provide elevated positions from which defenders could protect the city if necessary. But the wall is not only about war, it is also about identity. Inside lies the ordered life of the city. Outside stretches the wider countryside, where farmers work the fields and travellers move between distant settlements. The wall marks a boundary between these two worlds. Think about what it must feel like to approach such a place in the ancient world. Beyond these bricks lies a centre of trade, culture, religion, and political authority. Babylon is not simply a cluster of homes. It is one of the most powerful cities of its time, known throughout the Near East. Merchants travel here from distant lands. Diplomats arrive carrying messages from other kingdoms. Caravans loaded with goods slowly approach along dusty roads. As you walk, you begin to notice more travellers around you. Some lead donkeys burdened with baskets of grain. Others carry pottery jars balanced carefully on wooden frames. A small group of traders passes nearby with bundles of wool cloth wrapped in protective coverings. Their footsteps stir faint clouds of dust that drift lazily in the warm air. The sun is already climbing higher now, and the heat presses gently against the skin. In this climate, shade is precious, and the shadow cast by Babylon's massive walls begins to feel strangely inviting. But before you reach it, there's another detail worth noticing: the bricks themselves. If you look closely, you can see the faint impressions left by the hands that shaped them. Each brick began as wet clay mixed with chopped straw to strengthen the material. Workers pressed the mixture into rectangular moulds and left the bricks to dry beneath the Mesopotamian sun. No firing kilns were needed. The heat of the climate itself does the work. Over time, the bricks harden enough to support enormous structures. When stacked together and sealed with bitumen or mud mortar, they form walls strong enough to endure centuries. And yet, even in their strength, these materials remain connected to the earth. Unlike stone cities carved from mountains, Babylon always carries a subtle reminder of its origin in soft river mud. This gives the city an unusual relationship with time. Buildings must be repaired regularly. Bricks weather and crumble. Walls require constant maintenance, so construction in Babylon is never truly finished. It is an ongoing process, a quiet cycle of decay and renewal that mirrors the seasonal flooding of the rivers themselves. But here, standing before the immense wall, you feel mostly the presence of human determination. Generations of workers shaping clay, generations stacking bricks, generations maintaining the defences of a city that continues to grow. The shadow of the wall stretches across the road now. Travellers move slowly toward the gates ahead, and as you step closer to the towering structure, the outside world begins to fade behind you, while the ancient life of Babylon waits just beyond the entrance. Eventually you reach one of the great gates that pierce the wall. Traders pass through with donkeys and carts, farmers carry baskets of grain, and officials observe quietly from shaded corners. The gate itself feels monumental, not simply an entrance but a symbol of the city's power. Every traveller who passes beneath it understands that inside lies one of the most sophisticated urban centres of the ancient world. The opening in the wall is wide, but the passage through it feels deliberate. Massive doors made of wood and reinforced with bronze fittings can be closed when necessary, sealing the city from outside threats. Most days, however, the gates remain open, allowing the steady flow of life to move in and out. You step forward slowly with the others. The temperature changes slightly as the walls rise around you, casting a cool shadow across the road. The sounds of the countryside begin to soften behind you, replaced by the growing murmur of the city ahead. Footsteps, distant voices, the low creaking of wooden carts. These sounds echo faintly against the brick passage. Guards stand nearby, watching calmly as travellers pass. Their presence is not aggressive but attentive. Babylon is a city of rules and administration, and movement through its gates is quietly observed. Think about how many people have passed beneath this gateway. Farmers bringing harvests, caravans arriving from distant regions, messengers carrying news of wars, treaties, and royal decrees. Each traveller adds another thread to the complex life of the city. Just beyond the gate, the road widens slightly. The first thing you notice is the density of buildings. Houses rise close together, their mud brick walls forming a maze of narrow streets and shaded alleys. The air carries the subtle scent of cooking fires, animals, and warm clay. Babylon feels immediately alive. Yet it is not the chaotic noise of modern cities. Instead, the activity unfolds in a steady rhythm. People move with purpose but without urgency. Tasks repeat daily, shaped by routines that have developed over generations. The architecture here reflects both practicality and climate. Most buildings present plain walls to the street. Windows facing outward are rare. This design protects families from the intense summer heat and maintains privacy within crowded neighbourhoods. Life happens mostly inside. Behind those quiet walls lie courtyards filled with light, gardens of small plants, and shaded areas where families cook, work, and rest. From the street, however, the city reveals only fragments of this hidden world. A doorway opening briefly, a child running past, the sound of pottery clinking somewhere beyond a wall. You continue walking deeper into Babylon. The streets twist gently rather than following strict straight lines. This pattern develops naturally over time as homes expand, neighbours build additions, and small pathways evolve into permanent routes through the city. In places the street becomes so narrow that two carts cannot easily pass. But that is rarely a problem. Most transportation inside the city happens on foot. The ground beneath you is packed earth, worn smooth by years of traffic. Occasionally you notice small drainage channels running along the edges of the road, designed to carry away water during rare rains or household use. Even these details show careful planning. Babylon may appear organic and winding, but beneath its surface lies a surprising degree of organization. Administrative officials manage markets, priests oversee temples, scribes record transactions, engineers maintain irrigation canals beyond the walls. This intricate system allows the city to function smoothly despite its growing population. And as you walk further inside, something else becomes clear. Babylon is not only a place of survival, it is a place of ambition. Large construction projects continue constantly. New walls are repaired, temples expanded, roads improved. Kings invest enormous resources into shaping the city into a symbol of their power and devotion to the gods. But for most people living here, daily life remains simple. Bread must be baked, water must be carried, children must be raised, and somewhere beyond these narrow streets, the great temples and administrative buildings rise slowly above the rooftops. You will see them soon. For now, you continue deeper into the quiet, sun-warmed maze of Babylon's streets, where ordinary life unfolds in the shadow of one of history's most remarkable cities. Inside the walls, the city unfolds into narrow, winding streets. The ground beneath your feet is packed earth mixed with crushed clay, and the buildings rise close together, casting long bands of shade that soften the heat of the Mesopotamian sun. People move slowly but purposefully around you. This is not the silence of ruins we imagine today, but a living city filled with footsteps, quiet conversations, and the constant rhythm of daily survival. The street beneath your feet feels warm but firm. Years of footsteps have compressed the soil into a surface that holds together surprisingly well. In places the ground bears faint grooves where carts have passed repeatedly, their wooden wheels pressing gentle tracks into the clay. Dust drifts softly whenever someone walks by. But unlike the harsh winds of the open plains outside the city, the air here moves slowly between the buildings. The narrowness of the streets creates pockets of shade where the sunlight arrives only in thin ribbons. This is deliberate. Babylonian builders understand that the best defense against extreme heat is not wide open space, but shelter. When houses stand close together, they protect each other from the relentless Mesopotamian sun. The result is a city of corridors rather than avenues. As you walk, the sounds of life reveal themselves in small, quiet layers. Somewhere nearby, a woman calls softly to a child. A potter's wheel spins with a gentle scraping rhythm. From inside one home comes the steady grinding of grain against stone. These sounds drift through open doorways and across courtyard walls, creating a subtle background music of daily work. It is easy to imagine ancient cities as noisy and chaotic, but Babylon's streets feel surprisingly calm. Most people move slowly, conserving energy beneath the heat. Conversations happen in low voices. Tasks are completed methodically rather than hurriedly. This rhythm reflects an understanding of the climate. Work begins early in the morning when temperatures are still comfortable. By midday the heat becomes intense, encouraging people to retreat indoors or rest in shaded courtyards. You notice how often people pause in the shade, someone leaning against a wall, a merchant sitting quietly beside his goods, two neighbours exchanging news while avoiding the direct sunlight. Even the animals seem to understand the pattern. Donkeys stand patiently beside their loads, ears twitching lazily as they wait for their owners. Life in Babylon unfolds in harmony with the environment. The buildings themselves reveal subtle adaptations to this reality. Their walls are thick, sometimes more than 1/2 meter deep. Mudbrick has an important property. It absorbs heat slowly and releases it gradually during the night. This helps keep interiors cooler during the hottest parts of the day. Roofs are flat and often used as living spaces during the evening. At night, families may sleep there beneath the open sky, enjoying the brief relief of cooler air. As you continue along the street, you begin to notice how each doorway opens into a slightly different world. Some homes appear modest, their entrances narrow and unadorned. Others belong to wealthier families and feature carved wooden doors or decorative brickwork. But the differences remain subtle. Babylonian society contains hierarchy and wealth differences, yet most houses share similar basic materials and designs: mud brick, timber beams, reed mats, the resources of the land shaping the architecture of the people. Further down the street, a small group of children darts past you in sudden laughter. Their bare feet kick up tiny clouds of dust as they chase one another around a corner. Their energy feels timeless. For a moment, the ancient city feels strikingly familiar, because across thousands of years, some aspects of human life remain remarkably unchanged. Children play, neighbours talk, people walk the same paths day after day, and above it all the sun moves slowly across the sky, casting shifting shadows along the walls of Babylon. The city breathes in its own steady rhythm: dust, shade, footsteps, quiet voices, and the endless small movements of ordinary lives unfolding inside one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. You pause beside a typical Babylonian home. From the outside it appears simple. Walls of mud brick, a narrow doorway, and almost no windows facing the street. But inside lies a small private world. Most houses are built around central courtyards where families cook, rest, and escape the intense afternoon heat. The architecture itself reflects an understanding of climate that has been refined through generations. From the street, the building almost hides its true nature. The outer walls are plain and solid, designed more for privacy and protection than for display. Without windows facing the road, the house presents only a quiet surface of clay brick to the outside world. But step through the doorway and everything changes. Suddenly you find yourself inside an open courtyard filled with light. The sky above forms a square of bright blue framed by surrounding rooms. Sunlight pours down into this central space during the morning, warming the ground and illuminating the daily activities of the household. The courtyard is the heart of the Babylonian home. Here, families cook meals, repair tools, grind grain, and share conversations that drift softly through the air. Clay ovens sit along one wall, their rounded shapes blackened by years of cooking fires. Nearby stand large pottery jars filled with water drawn from wells or canals. These jars are essential in a climate where staying hydrated is a matter of survival. You notice how carefully everything is arranged. The design of the house reflects generations of practical knowledge. Rooms open toward the courtyard rather than the street, allowing fresh air to circulate while keeping the interior spaces protected from dust and noise. During the hottest hours of the day, the courtyard provides a shaded refuge. Fabric awnings or reed mats may be stretched overhead, creating pockets of cool shadow where people can rest. The floors are often packed clay or simple brick, smooth beneath bare feet. In wealthier homes, these surfaces might be plastered to create a cleaner finish. Around the courtyard, small rooms serve many purposes. One may store grain harvested from nearby fields. Another contains woven mats used for sleeping at night. A third might hold tools, baskets, and household goods. Furniture is minimal compared to modern standards. Low stools, reed mats, wooden chests. Most activities happen on the floor or on simple platforms built along the walls. But the simplicity of the furnishings does not mean the home lacks comfort. In fact, these houses are remarkably well adapted to the environment. The thick mud brick walls absorb the intense heat of the day, preventing it from penetrating quickly into the interior spaces. As evening arrives and the air cools, the stored warmth slowly radiates outward. This natural temperature regulation helps maintain a relatively stable indoor climate. Even without modern technology, the architecture quietly manages the challenges of Mesopotamia's harsh seasons. Look up toward the roof. Flat rooftops serve as additional living space, especially during the cooler evenings. Families may climb ladders to reach the top, spreading mats where they can sit together beneath the stars. In the stillness of night, the city transforms into a quiet landscape of rooftops, lantern light, and distant conversations drifting through the warm air. But for now, the courtyard remains the center of life. A woman kneels beside a grinding stone, pushing grain back and forth beneath a heavy upper stone. The rhythmic motion produces a soft scraping sound that repeats steadily. Nearby, a child watches with quiet curiosity, perhaps learning a skill that will one day become part of their own daily routine. These moments may seem ordinary, yet they are the foundation of civilization itself. Inside houses like this, generations of Babylonian families lived, worked, and shared their lives. Empires rose and fell beyond these walls, kings issued laws, temples were built and rebuilt. But here, within the quiet space of a courtyard home, the essential patterns of human life continued almost unchanged. Cooking, resting, learning, growing older beneath the same sun that warmed the mud brick walls. And in these humble homes built from the very earth beneath the city, the story of Babylon quietly unfolds. One ordinary day at a time, as the sun climbs higher, life inside the courtyard begins to unfold. Someone grinds grain using a heavy stone. Bread dough is shaped and placed inside a clay oven that radiates gentle warmth. Water is poured from pottery jars carried earlier from the river or nearby well. These quiet routines repeat day after day, forming the steady rhythm that sustains an entire civilization. Morning in Babylon begins early, long before the heat becomes difficult to bear. The first light arrives softly, spilling over the rooftops and sliding down the inner walls of the courtyard. The air still carries a trace of coolness left behind by the night, and for a brief moment the city feels calm and spacious. You notice the subtle sounds of waking life. A wooden door creaks open. A jar is lifted and set carefully on the ground. Somewhere beyond the courtyard walls, a rooster calls into the morning air. Inside the household, work begins almost immediately. Food preparation is one of the most important tasks of the day, and it starts with grain. A large, flat grinding stone rests on the ground. A smaller stone is pushed back and forth across its surface, crushing barley kernels into coarse flour. The motion is slow and steady. The sound it produces is quiet but constant, like a soft whisper of stone against stone. This simple process transforms raw grain into the foundation of nearly every meal. Barley was one of the most reliable crops grown in ancient Mesopotamia. It tolerates the region's salty soils and intense heat better than many other grains. Because of this, it became the backbone of Babylonian agriculture. Think about that for a moment. Across thousands of acres beyond the city walls, farmers cultivate fields of barley using irrigation canals that guide water from the Euphrates. After harvest, the grain is stored in large clay containers or communal granaries, and eventually much of it finds its way here into courtyards like this one. The flour produced by grinding is mixed with water to form dough. The dough is then shaped into flat rounds and pressed against the interior walls of a clay oven. The oven itself resembles a large upright jar built from hardened clay. Once heated, its thick walls retain warmth for hours. Bread cooks quickly in this environment, emerging with a slightly crisp surface and a soft interior. The smell of baking barley drifts gently through the courtyard, warm and earthy. Nearby, someone pours water into a shallow bowl. Water is precious here, and collecting it is part of the early morning routine. In some neighbourhoods it comes from communal wells. In others, it must be carried from canals connected to the river. Large pottery jars store this water safely inside the home. Their thick clay walls help keep the contents cool even as the temperature outside begins to rise. As you watch the household come alive, you begin to notice how many tasks require careful coordination. One person prepares food, another sweeps the courtyard floor, a third organizes tools or gathers fuel for the cooking fire. The work is constant, but it unfolds without urgency. Life here follows patterns refined over generations. Each member of the household understands their role within the daily cycle. Children often help with small tasks, learning through observation and repetition. Carrying small containers, fetching tools, or assisting with food preparation allows them to gradually understand the responsibilities that will shape their adult lives. There is something almost meditative about these routines. The steady rhythm of grinding grain, the quiet warmth of the oven, the soft murmur of conversation between family members. Outside the courtyard walls, the city of Babylon is slowly waking as well. Merchants begin opening market stalls. Farmers lead animals toward the gates. Scribes prepare tablets for recording the day's transactions. But inside this home, the focus remains simple: preparing the morning meal, sustaining the family, continuing a pattern of daily life that has remained remarkably consistent for centuries. When you step back and consider the scale of Babylon's achievements, its towering temples and impressive walls, it is easy to forget that the city ultimately depends on moments like this. A courtyard, a grinding stone, a loaf of bread baking quietly in the warmth of a clay oven. Civilization in the end is built not only by kings and architects, it is sustained by countless ordinary mornings. Food in Babylon is simple but deeply tied to the land. Barley bread forms the foundation of most meals, accompanied by onions, lentils, and the sweet richness of dates harvested from towering palm trees. You can almost smell the earthy aroma of baking bread mixed with the warm sweetness of fruit. It is a diet shaped by agriculture, climate, and the slow experimentation of generations. If you pause for a moment in the courtyard, the scent of food becomes impossible to ignore. Warm bread emerges from the clay oven, carrying the earthy aroma of roasted grain. The smell is comforting and familiar, the kind of scent that quietly signals the beginning of the day. Bread is not simply one food among many in Babylon. It is the center of nearly every meal. Barley flour mixed with water produces dough that can be shaped into many forms. Some breads are thin and flat, meant to be eaten quickly with other foods. Others are thicker and baked longer, allowing them to last several days. These loaves are often used almost like utensils. Pieces of bread can scoop lentils, hold small portions of vegetables, or absorb flavorful sauces made from herbs and oils. But bread alone does not define Babylonian cuisine. Nearby, someone opens a woven basket filled with dates. Dates grow on tall palm trees that thrive along the rivers of Mesopotamia. Their fruit ripens under the intense summer sun, turning deep brown and incredibly sweet. For Babylonian families, dates serve many purposes. They are eaten fresh. They're dried and stored for later use. They're crushed to create syrups that add sweetness to other foods. In a world without refined sugar, the date palm provides one of the most reliable sources of natural sweetness. You take a moment to imagine the taste. Soft, rich fruit with a caramel-like flavour. Paired with warm barley bread, it creates a combination both nourishing and satisfying. But the Babylonian diet extends beyond grain and fruit. Fields surrounding the city produce lentils, chickpeas, onions, garlic and cucumbers. These ingredients appear frequently in stews and simple cooked dishes. Cooking methods are straightforward. Clay pots sit over small fires fueled by dried reeds, wood scraps, or animal dung. Inside the pots, ingredients simmer slowly, blending flavors over time. This style of cooking requires patience rather than complexity. A pot may sit quietly over a flame for hours, releasing gentle steam that carries the scent of herbs and vegetables into the air. Fish also appears regularly in Babylonian meals. The rivers and canals provide an abundant source of freshwater fish that can be grilled, dried, or stewed. Fishermen use nets and simple traps to collect their catch, often bringing it directly to the markets inside the city. Occasionally meat from sheep or goats becomes part of a meal, but for most families, meat remains a relatively rare luxury reserved for special occasions or festivals. This might sound modest by modern standards. Yet nutritionally, the Babylonian diet is surprisingly balanced. Grains provide energy, legumes supply protein, fruits and vegetables offer essential nutrients, and through centuries of observation, Babylonian farmers and cooks learn how to combine these ingredients in ways that sustain large populations. Think about the long chain of effort behind each meal. Farmers irrigating fields under the Mesopotamian sun, workers harvesting grain and carrying it into the city, millers grinding barley into flour, cooks shaping dough and tending the fire. Every bite of bread represents the labour of an entire community. And yet, within the courtyard, the meal itself feels peaceful. Bread is shared. Dates pass from hand to hand. Conversation moves slowly, punctuated by quiet laughter. Food becomes more than nourishment. It becomes a moment of pause in the steady rhythm of Babylonian life. Outside the house, the city continues to grow louder as markets open and travellers arrive. But here in the courtyard, morning still lingers gently. A warm loaf of barley bread rests beside a bowl of sweet dates, and for a moment the ancient world tastes simple, familiar, and quietly comforting. Not far away, children move through the narrow streets with a kind of boundless energy that feels timeless. Some chase small rolling objects carved from clay. Others imitate adults, pretending to trade goods or herd imaginary animals. In a city known today for its kings and temples, childhood still unfolds in familiar ways, full of curiosity, noise, and endless exploration. As you step back into the street, the presence of children becomes immediately clear. Their voices rise above the softer conversations of adults, carrying laughter and bursts of excitement through the warm air. In the narrow streets of Babylon, childhood unfolds not in quiet isolation, but in full view of the community. Groups of children gather wherever space allows. Sometimes it's a small open courtyard between houses. Sometimes it's simply a slightly wider section of road where carts rarely pass. Here they invent games with whatever materials the environment provides. A smooth clay ball becomes the centre of a game of throwing and chasing. Small stones arranged in patterns turn into counting challenges. Bits of reed and scrap wood transform into imaginary animals, boats, or tools. These games may seem simple, yet they carry echoes of the adult world surrounding them. Children pretend to trade goods in miniature markets, copying the bargaining voices of merchants they hear each day. Others mimic farmers guiding animals or workers carrying baskets of grain. Through play, they begin to understand the roles that shape Babylonian society. Learning happens constantly, often without formal instruction. Young children observe everything. They watch how bread is prepared, how water is carried, how tools are used. Gradually they begin to assist with small tasks. A child may fetch a jar from a shelf. Another may help gather kindling for the cooking fire. These responsibilities grow slowly as they age. By the time Babylonian children reach adolescence, many already possess practical skills essential to daily survival. Boys might begin learning trades from their fathers or other craftsmen. Girls often assist their mothers with food preparation, weaving, and household management. But childhood is not only preparation for work, it is also a time of curiosity and imagination. As you watch the children running through the street, you notice how easily they navigate the maze-like layout of the city. The twisting pathways, hidden courtyards, and narrow alleys become a kind of playground. They know which corners hold the best shade. They know which rooftops offer views of the distant temples. They know where the market stalls sometimes offer small treats in exchange for simple errands. These experiences create a deep familiarity with the city itself. Babylon becomes more than a place to live. It becomes the landscape of childhood memories. You might imagine a child climbing onto a low wall to watch traders entering through the city gates. The arrival of distant caravans would feel mysterious and exciting. Exotic goods, strange accents, stories from lands far beyond the Mesopotamian plains. For young minds, such moments expand the boundaries of the known world. And yet, despite Babylon's reputation as a centre of power and culture, childhood here retains something universal. Children laugh, they argue, they chase one another beneath the warm sun. Across thousands of years of history, these experiences remain deeply recognizable. Empires may rise and fall, languages may change, cities may crumble into ruins, but the sound of children playing in dusty streets remains one of the most enduring elements of human life. In Babylon, that sound echoes between mud brick walls, rising briefly into the bright sky above, a reminder that even in the cradle of civilization, the most ordinary moments often carry the deepest continuity with our own lives today. Eventually you arrive at the marketplace. The air here carries the mingled scents of spices, animals, textiles, and freshly baked goods. Merchants sit beside carefully arranged goods, baskets of grain, clay pots, woven fabrics, and tools of bronze or copper. Babylon's economy thrives on exchange, and the market becomes the place where the agricultural world meets the urban one. The marketplace is one of the few places in Babylon where the calm rhythm of daily life grows noticeably louder. Voices overlap, animals shift and snort softly. Wooden carts creak under the weight of goods brought in from the countryside, yet even here, the atmosphere remains surprisingly measured. Trade unfolds through conversation rather than hurried transactions. You move slowly between rows of merchants seated beside their wares. One stall displays neat piles of barley and wheat, the grains shimmering faintly in woven baskets. Another offers clay vessels of every size, from small drinking cups to large storage jars tall enough to hold a season's harvest. The pottery glows softly in shades of red and brown, each piece shaped carefully by hand. Further along, a merchant unfolds lengths of wool cloth dyed in muted colours. The fabric is thick and durable, suitable for garments that must endure the intense climate of Mesopotamia. Wool production is one of the region's major industries. Large flocks of sheep graze in surrounding territories, providing the raw material for spinning and weaving. Textiles like these travel far beyond Babylon, moving along trade routes that connect cities across the ancient Near East. You notice how each merchant arranges their goods with quiet attention. Objects are placed carefully, creating small displays that allow customers to examine quality and craftsmanship. There are no bright signs or loud advertisements. Reputation matters more than spectacle. A skilled potter becomes known through the durability of their vessels. A textile maker earns trust through the strength of their weaving. Over time, buyers return to those whose work proves reliable. Money in Babylon does not yet exist in the familiar form of coins. Instead, many transactions rely on weighed amounts of silver or on direct exchange of goods. A farmer may trade barley for tools. A craftsman may exchange pottery for wool cloth. Scribes sometimes record larger transactions on clay tablets, ensuring agreements are remembered accurately. These tablets act as a form of ancient bookkeeping, preserving economic details that might otherwise be forgotten. As you walk deeper into the market, the variety of goods becomes striking. Bundles of herbs, fresh vegetables, fish still glistening from the river. Small carved objects made from imported stones. Each item tells a story of labour and movement. A fish caught in the Euphrates earlier that morning. A basket woven from reeds gathered along the marshes. A piece of copper that may have travelled hundreds of kilometres before reaching this stall. Babylon's market is not just a place of commerce. It is a meeting point of worlds. Farmers from rural villages speak with city residents. Travellers from distant regions exchange news with local merchants. Through these conversations, information spreads as easily as goods. News of harvests, rumours of distant conflicts, stories of strange landscapes beyond the horizon. In this way, the marketplace becomes an informal network of communication. And yet beneath the flow of trade lies something quieter. A shared understanding that survival depends on cooperation. Farmers rely on craftsmen for tools. Craftsmen rely on farmers for food. Merchants connect both groups through exchange. Together they create an economic system that allows Babylon to sustain a population far larger than any isolated village could support. You pause for a moment at the edge of the market. The sounds of bargaining drift through the warm air. Grain pours softly into measuring baskets. A donkey shakes its head, jingling the small bells tied around its harness, and all around you, the quiet pulse of commerce continues, sustaining one of the ancient world's greatest cities. Beyond the city walls, farmers guide water through canals that stretch across the fields like branching veins. These irrigation systems are the true lifeline of Babylon. Without them, the land would return to dry steppe within a single season. You watch as water slowly floods a field of barley, turning dusty soil into fertile ground capable of sustaining thousands of people. If you walk beyond the gates of Babylon and out onto the open plain, the transformation of the landscape becomes immediately visible. Without irrigation, the land here would appear harsh and dry for much of the year. Rainfall alone cannot support large-scale agriculture in this region, but the canals change everything. Long channels carved into the earth carry water from the Euphrates outward across the countryside. Some canals are wide enough for small boats to travel along them. Others branch into smaller streams that feed individual fields. Seen from above, the system resembles a vast network of arteries. Water flows outward slowly and deliberately, guided by gravity and controlled by simple gates made from wood and packed mud. Farmers open these gates carefully, allowing water to spread across their fields. You watch as a thin stream begins to fill a shallow channel between rows of barley. The dry soil darkens as it absorbs moisture, releasing a faint earthy scent into the air. Within minutes, the field begins to change. What looked like dusty ground moments earlier now glistens with life-giving water. This is the miracle of irrigation. By directing river water across the floodplain, Babylonian farmers transform an unpredictable environment into a reliable source of food. The technique requires both knowledge and cooperation. Fields must be levelled carefully so water spreads evenly. Canals must be cleared of sediment that gradually accumulates over time. Gates must be opened and closed at the correct moments to avoid flooding. Entire communities participate in maintaining these systems. Workers gather periodically to dredge canals, repair embankments, and strengthen levees. Without this shared effort, the delicate balance of water distribution would collapse. And if the irrigation system fails, the consequences could be severe. Crop yields would fall, food supplies would shrink, the population of the city would face hardship. Because of this, irrigation becomes more than an agricultural practice. It becomes a cornerstone of Babylonian civilization. Even the government plays a role in managing water. Royal officials sometimes oversee large canal projects, ensuring that water reaches important agricultural regions. Laws regulate how water may be used and what responsibilities farmers hold in maintaining canals. This careful management allows Babylon to support tens of thousands of residents within its walls. As you stand beside the irrigated field, you notice the quiet patience required for this work. Farmers walk slowly along narrow ridges separating plots of land. They carry simple tools made from wood and bronze. Their movements are steady and deliberate. Agriculture here is not a race. It is a process shaped by seasons, sunlight, and the flow of the river itself. The barley plants sway gently in the warm breeze. Green shoots stretch toward the sky, absorbing energy from the sun that will eventually become bread, beer, and countless meals inside Babylon's homes. When you step back and consider the scale of the irrigation network, the achievement becomes remarkable. Hundreds of kilometers of canals, thousands of fields carefully tended, all supported by the quiet power of two ancient rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates continue their slow journey across the plains, carrying water from distant mountains toward the Persian Gulf. And along their banks, human ingenuity has learned to guide that water, turning mud, sunlight and patience into the foundation of one of the earliest great civilizations. In quieter parts of the city, scribes sit with small tablets of damp clay resting on their palms. Using sharpened reeds, they press tiny wedge-shaped marks into the surface. These symbols form cuneiform, one of the earliest writing systems in human history. With simple tools and wet clay, Babylon records laws, trade agreements, astronomical observations, and stories meant to outlast generations. If you step into one of the administrative courtyards of Babylon, the atmosphere feels slightly different from the bustling streets outside. The sounds are softer here. Instead of grinding stones and merchant voices, you hear the faint tapping of reed styluses pressing into clay. The motion is precise and rhythmic, almost like quiet raindrops falling onto earth. This is the work of scribes. In a world where most people cannot read or write, scribes hold a special place in Babylonian society. Their knowledge allows the city to remember things that human memory alone cannot reliably preserve. Before you lies a small clay tablet. It is smooth, slightly damp, and roughly the size of your hand. A scribe holds it carefully, balancing it on his palm while guiding a sharpened reed into the surface. Each press leaves a wedge-shaped mark. These wedges form patterns that represent sounds, words, and numbers. The system is called cuneiform, a name that comes from the Latin word for wedge. At first glance, the marks may appear abstract. Tiny clusters of lines and triangles pressed into clay. But to a trained scribe, each pattern carries meaning. Some represent goods such as barley, wool, or oil. Others record numbers and measurements used in trade. More complex tablets might contain legal contracts, royal decrees, or religious texts. Think about the quiet power of this system. Without writing, a city the size of Babylon would struggle to function. Markets would rely entirely on memory. Laws could change with every retelling. Agreements might vanish the moment the participants walked away. Writing changes that. A contract pressed into clay becomes permanent. A list of stored grain can be checked again and again. A law issued by a king can remain visible long after his voice fades from memory. Scribes also serve as the city's record keepers. Inside temple complexes and administrative buildings, shelves hold thousands of clay tablets stacked carefully together. These archives preserve details of daily life that would otherwise disappear into time. Records of harvests, lists of workers, inventories of goods arriving from distant lands. Even personal letters occasionally appear among the official documents. Each tablet becomes a small fragment of the city's story. What makes this system particularly remarkable is its durability. Unlike paper or parchment, clay tablets can survive for thousands of years if they are baked or accidentally hardened in a fire. Many of the tablets archaeologists study today were preserved precisely because ancient buildings burned and the heat transformed soft clay into ceramic. So the quiet work of these scribes echoes far beyond their own lifetimes. Messages written for practical reasons become windows into an ancient civilization. But learning to write cuneiform is not easy. The system contains hundreds of signs, each requiring careful memorization. Young scribes spend years in training, copying tablets again and again until their hands move automatically. Their classrooms are known as tablet houses. Here, students practice pressing symbols into clay, while teachers correct mistakes and guide their progress. It is slow, disciplined work that demands patience and precision. Yet the result is extraordinary. With nothing more than damp clay and a sharpened reed, Babylonian scribes create one of humanity's earliest systems for preserving knowledge. If you pause for a moment and listen, the room fills with the soft sound of styluses pressing into clay, tiny marks accumulating across the surface, quietly recording the life of a city, and through these wedges in clay, Babylon learns how to speak, not only to its own people, but to the distant future as well. Inside administrative buildings, officials consult tablets that contain the laws governing daily life. These legal traditions stretch back to famous codes such as that of Hammurabi. While the city may seem chaotic from the outside, an intricate system of rules quietly shapes trade, marriage, property, and justice. Law becomes the invisible framework holding Babylonian society together. When you enter one of Babylon's administrative halls, the atmosphere feels calm and deliberate. Officials sit beside low tables covered with clay tablets. Some tablets are newly written, their surfaces still slightly damp. Others are hardened with age, their wedge-shaped marks preserved for decades or even centuries. These tablets contain the rules that organize life inside the city. To outsiders, Babylon may appear like a maze of streets and markets, full of unpredictable human activity. But beneath that surface lies a carefully structured legal system. One of the most famous examples is the Code of Hammurabi. Hammurabi ruled Babylon many centuries before the height of the city's later empire. During his reign, a long list of laws was compiled and carved onto a large stone monument. The code addressed everyday matters. What happens if a builder constructs a house that later collapses? What compensation is owed if someone damages another person's property? How should disputes over land, wages, or marriage be resolved? Each law attempts to create order in a world where misunderstandings and conflicts are inevitable. Think about how important this would be in a growing city. Babylon contains merchants, farmers, craftsmen, priests, and travellers from distant lands. Without shared rules, disagreements could easily escalate into violence or chaos. Law provides a framework that allows diverse groups of people to coexist. It establishes expectations, it defines responsibilities, and when conflicts arise, it offers a process for resolving them. Judges and officials consult the written tablets to guide their decisions. Witnesses may be called to testify. Scribes record the outcome so that agreements become part of the city's official memory. In this way, justice in Babylon becomes both practical and symbolic. Practical because it helps maintain social stability. Symbolic because it reflects the belief that law itself is connected to divine order. Babylonian kings often present themselves not merely as rulers, but as guardians of justice appointed by the gods. By enforcing fair laws, they demonstrate their responsibility to maintain harmony between heaven and earth. Of course, like many ancient legal systems, Babylonian law is not always equal for everyone. Social status matters. Penalties for crimes may differ depending on whether the individuals involved belong to the elite class, the common population, or the enslaved. Yet even within these distinctions, the presence of written law creates a degree of predictability. People know what behaviours are expected. They know what consequences may follow certain actions, and that knowledge helps shape everyday decisions. As you watch the officials consulting their tablets, you realize that the true strength of Babylon does not lie only in its walls or temples. It lies in systems like this. Structures of agreement that allow thousands of individuals to share a single urban space without constant conflict. The tablets rest quietly on the table. Their wedge-shaped symbols appear small and fragile. Yet within those tiny marks lies a powerful idea, that human societies can organize themselves through shared rules, and that even in a city as vast and ancient as Babylon, order can emerge from the careful recording of words pressed gently into clay. So as you settle into your own quiet moment in time, it is worth remembering the world we've just wandered through. A city rising slowly from river mud. Fields of barley moving gently beneath the Mesopotamian sun. courtyards where bread baked in clay ovens while children laughed in narrow streets. For a while you stood inside Babylon, not the Babylon of legend and towering ambition, but the quieter Babylon of ordinary days, the farmers guiding water through patient canals, the scribes pressing tiny wedges into soft clay, the artisans shaping bronze, wool and pottery with steady hands, the priests watching the stars move across an impossibly clear night sky, and the families who lived their entire lives within mud-brick walls warmed by the sun. When you step back across the long stretch of history, something remarkable becomes clear. Babylon was not only an empire of kings and monuments, it was a living community sustained by countless small actions repeated day after day, grinding grain, sharing bread, carrying water, repairing canals, teaching children how to live in a world shaped by rivers, heat, and the slow patience of time. And like every civilization that has ever existed, Babylon eventually faded. The great walls crumbled, the canals filled with silt, the temples that once rose toward the sky slowly returned to the earth from which they were made. Today, much of the ancient city lies buried beneath layers of soil and history. Yet the people who lived there were not so different from us. They woke to the morning light. They worked, rested, worried, celebrated and hoped for the future. Their lives unfolded beneath the same sky that stretches above you now. The same stars that Babylonian astronomers studied still move across the night, following patterns older than any human city. And when you think about that, the vastness of time becomes strangely comforting. Civilizations rise, civilizations fade, but the quiet rhythms of human life continue. Someone somewhere is still baking bread, someone is still watching the stars, someone is still listening to the slow movement of water beside a river. So as the ancient world fades back into the darkness of history, let your thoughts drift gently with it. Feel the weight of the day dissolve a little more, the walls of Babylon growing distant, the sounds of its streets fading into soft silence. You are part of a story billions of years long, a small moment in the endless unfolding of time on this planet. And for now, in this quiet moment between past and present, you can simply rest. Let the river carry the ancient city away into the night, and let sleep come as slowly and peacefully as the Euphrates flowing beneath the stars.